Good evening, everybody. Today we're going to complete our story of modern mating market dysfunction by looking at the experience of women. If you look at the playlist, the previous video was about incels, and today we're going to talk about insings, which is the experience that women have who cannot find a partner. How can a woman not find a partner, you might say? Everyone wants to fuck us. Fucking us is not a partner, that's a fuckboy. And this is what we're going to talk about now. I am drawing here from a book by Larsen, a Norwegian researcher, and he wrote a book called Stories of Love from Vikings to Tinder. Stories of Love from Vikings to Tinder, the Evolution of Modern Mating Ideologies, Dating Dysfunction and Demographic Collapse. And he did a study on this for one of the European Union, like under a grant. So what is really interesting about the incel and the insing stories is that they're actually taken from literature that is currently on. Like the incel story came from a Norwegian series about an incel from 2000 to 2022. And the story of the woman, the insing, comes from a book that is going to be apparently made into a Netflix movie in 2025. So this section is called Serial Dating as Self-Harm. Now you see the book is $145 on Amazon. So I went ahead and printed it out, and this we're going to talk about this serial dating as self-harm. Okay? And in this video and the last one, I'm mostly just reading from his book, so you don't have to buy it and print it all out. So the half of Malmö protagonist, or the main character, journey from being an insing to being pair bonded mirrors that of the author. The author who wrote the book put this into, like, based on her own experiences in the modern dating market. The author is Amanda Romari. When she turned 30, she started serial dating using both the Tinder app and analog bar hookups, thinking 5 to 6 dates would suffice to find someone with whom she could spend a considerable part of her life. 2 years later, she had had sex with so many men, she writes in the novel, that this would be the primary regret on her deathbed. She felt sexually exploited by men who showed no interest in fulfilling her desire for a pair bond. Sexual strategy theory posits that the discordant pressures on men and women explain why they pursue different strategies for short and long-term mating. So when she experienced post-coital regret, she had fallen prey to the short-term strategies of sexually attractive men. Tinder and the urban bar scene gave her access to the most compelling men, but only for casual sex. The men's short-term orientation and her relatively lower long-term mate value made pair bonding an unlikely outcome. Her strategies could also make her come across as short-term oriented, but according to the author here, Larsen, he says that she has shown a limited understanding of these mechanisms. Her subjective experience was that, and how she experienced was, quote, serial dating is a form of self-harm. You are not rejected for something you say or think, but for how you are as a person. You show yourself from your best side on a date. You're funny and social. You have dressed up and you have sex. It is so incredibly intimate and vulnerable. I really gave it my all every time, and still no one wanted me. That was her experience. Romari, the author, the insing, took notes during this period as a form of self-therapy, and that's how she came up with her novel. So it says that this novel is being adapted into a Netflix series scheduled for 2025. I can't wait to read it because I've experienced it. Any woman on here has experienced this. We go online to meet a guy to date, and these guys all just want to fuck us, and most of these guys are not hot enough. So the novel begins, half of Malmö begins by introducing readers to Amanda's group of female friends. They all have the same experience of unlimited sexual access, but mostly being involuntarily single. Her sister insists that Amanda is a 10 and that 10 stayed in all leagues. Amanda considers her mate value to be a 7 out of 10, and she recognizes that her sex partners have a higher value. At no point or ever does she consider that there can be a difference between someone's short and long-term mate value. A man can be so sexy that women consider him exquisite for casual copulation, but if he is unemployed, emotionally unstable, cognitively weak, and dislikes children, his long-term value is far lower. Women, too, are evaluated differently for one-night stands and relationships. Amanda assigns value to herself and potential partners based mostly on how sexy they appear in the context of a first date. Given her stated goal of finding a long-term partner, she assesses value, selects men, and chooses dating strategies in a dysfunctional manner. She presents herself as sexually available, since this elicits a more favorable response from the men whom she perceives to be the most attractive. Research supports that her strategy is effective for short-term mating, but can work counter to her long-term ambitions. So in the novel, Amanda's first sex partner is a management consultant. He is the best-looking man that she has seen in a long time, a Jake Gyllenhaal lookalike with a large, pleasure-inducing penis and a large central apartment. Having exceptional looks and finances, he fulfills important female preferences for both short and long-term mating. The consultant and his friend are by far the superior males in the bar. An hour after meeting them, Amanda and her friend are on their way to have sex. Neither of the women is later invited for a second date. This encounter speaks to how Amanda adapts to the preferences of short-term oriented men to gain access to the men who arouse her the most. So she has shifted her dating strategy to match that of the men who want casual sex. And she doesn't even know it. Because in her mind, she's like, he turns me on, he's so hot. She does not have sufficient long-term mate value to be considered a potential girlfriend by a long-term oriented high-value man. She also does not seek out the arenas that promote long-term oriented dating. Now, I don't know what those arenas would be, as it's not here mentioned, but for sure bars and Tinder are not it. Bars and Tinder give her immediate access to the most attractive men as long as she makes herself sexually available from the onset. Sexual conflict theory says that a core conflict between the sexes is how much time should pass before the first intercourse, with men wanting very little time and women wanting more time, ideally, right? Attractive men have more partners and they wait less time. By agreeing to have sex with the consultant after 1 hour, Amanda signals that she does not require a high investment. Short-term oriented men prefer such mates, easy women, making Amanda more than good enough for a one-night stand. Her maladaptive strategies are informed by how women have evolved highly selective preferences for short-term mating to ensure that in case of pregnancy, the offspring would at least have good genes. Women's promiscuous attraction system is exceptionally discriminatory, but can trigger as strong impulses as that of men. So let me stop on that for a moment. Women's promiscuous attraction system is exceptionally discriminatory, but can trigger as strong impulses as that of men. So when women are on like they're on their promiscuous mating, like this guy turns me on. Women are very, very selective. Okay, only like for me, if I were to, I only see one guy every 3 or 4 months where I'm like, oh my God, I would fuck this guy. The rest of them don't even come across my radar, or they're repulsive. Okay, that's how women are. But when we are turned on, we can be as turned on as a man gets turned on. Like it's strong. That's what he's saying. The very sexiest men arouse in women an equally strong sense of attraction as the sexiest women arouse in men. So we get just as horny for the top guys as you guys get for women, the hottest women. In such instances, at least in gender equal and sexually liberal Scandinavia, women signal their attraction even more strongly than what men do. When they finally encounter a man able to arouse them, they often seize that opportunity. However, when women encounter average men, they are less attracted than what men are to average women. We're like not attracted at all. But I think that's where women have to rely on their other attraction system, not the promiscuous one, but the courtly love, romantic love, pair bonding one. I forget what he calls it, where you get to know a man over time and bond to him that way. All right, I already figured out many years ago that being immediately turned on by a guy is a red flag. It's like run, do not engage. Anyway, so these mechanisms of this promiscuous attraction system trigger emotions that motivate Amanda to adopt short-term strategies that go against her own pair bonding ambitions. This is what women don't realize, that they are, when they go on this promiscuous attraction system, they're in a short-term mating market. Okay, because they go for the hottest guys, they want to have sex right away, and that's short-term mating, and that goes counter to what a woman really wants when she's looking for a partner. She has conflicting desires that the modern Scandinavian environment makes more challenging to navigate. In these countries, dating typically involves early sex. To be motivated for copulation on the first date, Amanda feels that she has no choice but to pursue only the men who immediately trigger her lust. If she had considered more carefully which qualities would be more important to her in a long-term partner, she may have adjusted the value she assigns different traits, just like Josephine had done in Sigurd. In the previous video I made, if you go to the playlist for this one, Sigurd the incel ended up with a woman who accepted him because he committed to her. He wasn't going to cheat on her like those other assholes. So the woman made a decision to lower her standard on hotness to get a guy that she could have a good relationship with who wouldn't cheat on her. And that's what Amanda has to do. That's what women have to do. We have to not just go for the guys that trigger immediate lust. But since in Scandinavia, they are really pressured to have sex right away, she's like, how can I have sex right away with a guy who doesn't turn me on right away? Amanda and her friends' choice of mating arenas, their signaling of short-term intentions, and selection of men with far superior short-term mate value all but ensure that copulation does not progress to pair bonding. Studies show that men prefer similar value and less sexually available women when seeking a long-term partner. Okay, so when men seek a long-term partner, they want someone that has similar value to them in all different arenas, you know, demographically, socially, educationally, lifestyle, all of that. And they like a woman who's not as sexually available, which totally makes sense. I've heard guys say, I don't mind if she has sex with me on the first date, as long as I know that isn't what was her intention, like that's just what happened. And some couples do get married after having sex on the first date. But women that are in a hookup mode are not good partner material, I'm going to tell you, not in a dating space. Because women in a dating space are not hooking up, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of what this points to, is that that's what men want in a wife. They want someone who is not sleeping around. But Amanda has sex on the first date to motivate men to meet her again, so that over time they can realize her long-term value. With regard to the men she dates in light of her goals, this bait and switch strategy is misguided. The effective shift hypothesis describes how promiscuously successful, short-term oriented men tend to detach emotionally following first-time intercourse, while women often experience positive effect after sex, which is meant to facilitate a long-term relationship. Men who have had many partners often find women less sexually and physically attractive after intercourse. This is generally not the case for men who have had few sex partners. I've also remembered that John Gray would always say that men bond to you by doing things, and that it's better for a woman to get to know a man, have him do things for her, do activities together, so that he can bond with her before having sex. But again, in an environment where people feel pressure to have sex right away, I guess they're not doing that. So for Amanda, a more goal-aligned strategy would be to find men willing to spend pre-coital time with her. Yeah. And like, and these hot guys that are just out there to get sex, they're not going to do that. You don't put out by the second or third date. They're off. They're done. You're going to find the next girl if that's what, And I think that men know when they first see a woman that that's the girl I want to marry. I think that's very common. They see her and they're like, she's the one. That's very common. I've heard that so often among men, like, yep, I'm going to marry that girl. And giving sex right away is not going to bond him, ladies. If such a candidate, like a man who would be willing to spend time with her before sex, if he and Amanda had sufficient time to see if their personalities matched, if they had shared interests and matching intelligence and other traits, then pair bonding would be a more likely outcome. After suffering intense feelings of sexual regret, Amanda comes to suspect that early sex is not the best way to sell herself as a long-term partner. When she experiments with holding back sex, she finds that the most attractive men are less interested. She bemoans, "Do I have to agree to immediate sex to be allowed to have sex?" Again, her conflicting desires. This is a conflicting desire. She wants a high-value man and she wants a relationship. This is a conflicting desire. This leads to confusion informed by her evolved psychology. Women's short and long-term mating criteria are relatively similar, so women often treat casual sex as a springboard for long-term relationships. The fact that modern mating markets channel so much sexual opportunity to the most attractive men makes casual sex a less suited entry point for pair bonding. Kinnair et al., that's a researcher, found that people do not consider it a good dating strategy for women or men to have sex early if their ambitions are long-term. And I've talked to so many hot guys that have told me that when there's a woman that they want to date for a relationship, they are not pushing the sex. They want to get to know her. They don't want to turn her off. They don't want her to think that they're just about the sex, because they can get sex anywhere. It's easy for them to get sex, but if they meet a woman they actually like, they're going to take it really, really slow. That's what some really super hot guys have told me. Younger guys, I'm talking late 20s, early 30s, like hot. They were clients, okay? They were not guys I hooked up with. Okay, people believe that it is more conducive to have fun together, engage in deep conversations, and spend significant amounts of time with each other. Even though Amanda feels regret, she does not change her strategies. She doesn't seek out markets where people could be more long-term oriented. And she doesn't pursue men more likely to have long-term intentions. She seems neither to understand the intricacies of her own mating psychology, nor be able to read the intentions of the men with whom she has sex. Amanda's feelings of intense regret trigger no adaptive shift in behavior, as pain does not always communicate effectively enough how we should change. So Amanda continues to do what feels best in the moment. She can't figure out why none of this is working. She has a lot of regret, but she keeps doing it. She approaches whom she finds to be the most attractive man in the bar or swipes right on the small number of Tinder men who give the impression of fulfilling her mate preferences. She thinks about lowering her standards, but the effective rewards that the most compelling men offer when they charm her on first dates habituate Amanda to high arousal encounters. A few of her sex partners agree to additional dates, but only after she has taken the initiative. The author, Romar, so Amanda, offers a convincing portrayal of how having unlimited access to sexy men shapes female expectations. One date was, quote, too good looking, had a really big dick and was crazy fit, so tight muscles that you could almost not feel anything soft when you touched your fingers against the skin. I have only met one such man before whose skin felt like cement. Before they have sex, Amanda cannot help but ask him if he is a player. Similar to how Josephine in the incel story video I made earlier today asked Seeger if he was an asshole. The date smoothly brushes aside her accusations. Amanda suspects what awaits post-coitus, that she'll be dumped, but she gives in to desire. The experienced, high-value man is able to provide her with gratifying sex, but has no interest in spending the full night with her. He detaches emotionally. Amanda has grown accustomed to being sent home once the copulation is over. She reflects around how dysfunctional this is, but lays the blame on men for being exploitative. Amanda continues her search for a highly arousing boyfriend. On a date with a 6'3" professional dancer, she describes him as shockingly handsome, a godlike man with great hair, hands, and teeth. He has the social skills to give Amanda her best ever Tinder date. At times, her selection of men is done with a greater focus on traits that have long-term value. But since she has top-shelf access, she cannot bring herself to select less compelling men. She dates professional athletes, celebrity musicians, medical doctors, and other high status individuals. She said in an interview that, quote, after every time I was dumped, I lowered my demands more and more until there was nothing left. Based on how she describes her selection process and the characteristics of her dates later in the book, she may have lowered her standards some, but at least the fictional Amanda seems mostly to have continued dating higher value men. In terms of first dates, most of these men are superior choices, having the talents that allow them to succeed with short-term mating and the dating experience that comes with that, result in the top percentiles of men being able to cater to women's short-term preferences in a manner that average men really cannot. Theoretically, women could benefit from their short-term sexual market power by sexually consuming the most attractive men for as long as they pleased, then change orientation and strategies to attract a similar value partner with traits and attitudes more conducive to long-term mating. For some women, this transition seems challenging because, having grown accustomed to short-term mating with attractive men, can have adverse consequences for a woman's ability to forge successful pair bonds. Because they're wanting that immediate arousal, and the average guy doesn't know how to charm you, sweep you off your feet, be a player, talk to you. And I also want to say she sees these men like as objects. She just sees them as fuck objects. I don't hear anything about her getting interested in them, cooking dinner for them, finding out what they're interested in. Like, she's just all about the cock, the abs, the success. Like, she's being very superficial here. If she's looking for a boyfriend, like when I wrote the book The Fuck List, I was just looking for sex. So I was a little bit superficial. But when you look for a boyfriend, you have to look for a man who wants to love you and your children. You have to look for other qualities. Like, does he want children? Is he a good person? what kind of person is he? What do we have in common? And I don't see any of that. You know, she's just like, this serial dating strategy is not, like, that's not healthy in the long term, really. If serially dating higher value men leads women to overestimate their own mate value, they are likely to increase their mate standards across a variety of indicators, making it hard to find someone who's both compelling enough and willing to bond with them. That's the other problem. You get used to having like these really hot guys that you have access to for sex, and then it's harder to be like, oh my God, now I have to sell it for guys with 7 out of 10. He's not that hot. And they think because they could get this guy to fuck them, they can get a guy like this to date them, but it's different. Women have to understand that just because a guy wants to fuck you doesn't mean he wants to date you. I've made a lot of videos on this, and I think most women have realized this by now. Amanda arrives at the realization that it's the modern dating format itself that has made her so discriminatory. I think she finally has an insight. Quote, "Is it so that when you feel that a date is too good to be true, it is actually too good to be true? That only douches can be so intimate and loving the first time you meet, and that it therefore never ends well?" By douches, she's referring to short-term oriented, high-value men who are on high and dark triad traits. Dark triad men need not invest years in a courtship. Men with these traits are often drawn to sexual conquering, capable of making a strong first impression and able to get their way at the expense of others. Realizing that such men are the only ones able to elicit her arousal and infatuation, at least on first dates, Amanda feels like she wants to die. This is an emotional low point of the book, the scene in which she understands that her own psychology is to blame, not primarily the men whom she has allowed to fulfill their own mate preferences. Her emotions, against which she feels powerless, draw her to men with whom exploitation is a likelier outcome than pair bonding. More average men with a long-term orientation generally do not have those traits and skills that arouse in her an immediate desire to mate. In bars, they do not show up on her radar. On Tinder, she swipes them away. As David Buss writes, female choosiness seems to make most men, quote, invisible as viable options in women mating minds. The majority of men simply do not exist when women consider their options. Tinder caters to this aspect of female psychology by making rejection a breeze. Effortless swipes that erase 95% of men from the women's digital pool of potential mates. Modern technology and dating norms are not optimized for pair bonding. In the context of a first date out on town, it is hard for men with high long-term mate value to showcase qualities such as their partner and parenting skills, their willingness to commit and invest in their pair bond, their strong social standing, and their ability to plan and provide. Although both sexes prefer a high level of agreeableness in long-term partners, dark triad traits seem more effective for making a strong enough first impression. If Amanda had prioritized spending time with similar value men, similar value to hers, instead of depending on her promiscuous attraction system, okay? If Amanda had prioritized spending time with similar value men instead of depending on her promiscuous attraction system, she may have experienced emerging feelings of love, a pair bonding emotion that motivates women to have sex also with lower value men. This pair bonding attraction system was catered to by older forms of courtship, like those under the courtly, companionate, and romantic regimes. Okay, that's the word I was missing before, because women have these two attraction systems. The promiscuous attraction system, where we just want to fuck the hot guys, That's like instant arousal. And we have a second one, that we can get attracted to similar value men, of our pair bonding attraction system, which is cultivates slowly over time as we get to know someone. And then we want to have sex with that man. We get turned on by that man. That's the attraction system that we have to go for. That's the attraction system that we have to tune into, ladies, if you want to be in a relationship. You have to meet regular guys, get to know them, give them a chance. If he's a 7 out of 10, this is just not me reading anymore. If he's a 7 out of 10, go out with him again, see if he can come an 8 out of 10 or you're 10 out of 10. I was really in love with my ex-husband. He was not a 10 out of 10. He was not, definitely in the top 5 or 10%. I would say he's in the top 20, not like a loser, but you can build up an attraction system through getting to know a man over time. If the man has a chance to display his positive traits, his mate value, he still has to do it. And in older forms of courtship, before we just went to this hookup culture, men did have to do it. There was courtship, the courtly companionate and romantic periods did require a man to court a woman, to have resources, and to court her. In the pre-modern era, Amanda would have had access to a much smaller number of potential mates. Let's put Amanda back to pre-Tinder. She would have had access to a much smaller number of potential mates. The courtship likely would have lasted months or years. She would have gotten to know her courter more deeply, and he her. Instead, Tinder encourages her to evaluate a never-ending line of men using seconds or minutes on each. Research shows that when women have many choices, they tend to eliminate candidates by a single attribute at a time. Visual cues become more important. For Amanda, her selecting attribute is mostly hotness, which is essential when your dating and strategy includes sex on the first meeting. When women have fewer options, they focus less on visual aspects and evaluate potential partners more holistically. Having faced a smaller pool of candidates also leaves people more satisfied with their decision. Amanda feels debilitated by choice. She portrays that she falls prey to her own evolved mate preferences. And in interviews, she suggests that one solution could be return to 20th century mating practices, but you know, society moves forward, not backward. Now, it's also true that there's no cultural pressure on Amanda that encourages her to change her strategy. Her promiscuity is not discouraged through shaming, as it was in the past. And also not by her having a bunch of illegitimate children because there's birth control. So there's nothing to constrain her in her environment. Half of Malmö places the blame on present-day culture, not female agency. So in that book, the thematic argument evokes that of Louis Perry in The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. That's another book I've made videos about. You can search my channel. Women were promised emancipation through sexual liberation, but confluent love, or love that focuses on an individual getting their own needs for happiness met, has primarily benefited the small number of men with high short-term mate value. So Louis Perry and some other authors conclude that today's mating regime is unhealthy. Contemporary sex norms align poorly with female psychology and societal demands. Earlier moralities channeled sexual lust into social behaviors that mostly ended in marriage and reproduction. Today's hedonism encourages people to do what feels best in the moment. So in the later half of the book, Amanda's challenge is to master how not to do what provides her the greatest short-term rewards, but what can get her pair bonded. Her turning point comes after she, for the first time, is able to sympathize with incels. Now, Amanda titled her book something about all of Malmö consists of half the men who dumped me or something. And this shows that she is not looking at all the men. She's just looking at the men offering short-term sex. She is not even looking or considering the men that would be willing to pair bond with her because they're not going to be on Tinder. So some researchers, or this one researcher, they quote Guts, believes that the proportion of promiscuous maters is increasing as a consequence of large urban markets, social anonymity, and a culture of sexual openness. The modern environment seems to trigger short-term ambitions, even in lower value men, as they witness the mating success of the most attractive men. Another researcher, Young, found that not only female instincts but low-value men are adopting unrealistic standards that prevent pair bonding. Women may never have had greater access to short-term mating, but such practices bring fewer advantages than it did in our ancestral environment, when women to a greater extent could depend on short-term mates to offer gifts as a form of appreciation. The result of these developments is lose-lose dynamics for large groups of both men and women. Amanda's possible salvation comes in the form of Emil, a man whose good looks make him appear to be a player, but whose insecurities have contributed to him adopting a long-term orientation. Confident men can also be long-term oriented, but in the portrayal of Emil, it's suggested that his shy nervousness has hindered him from engaging in the mating behaviors. He badly wants to pair bond with Amanda, but she's not sure whether she's capable of settling for someone who only has the hot exterior to which she is accustomed, but not the confident personality. Their courtship in the book illustrates the struggles insings, involuntarily female singles, can experience when transitioning away from serial dating the most attractive men. Because see, the most attractive men are not just visually attractive. They're charming, they're confident, they're cocky, and their energy just is all part of it, okay? It's not just their looks. Wary of falling prey to more short-term deception, Amanda demands to know when Emil last had sex, which was 3 years ago with his ex. He is a nerdy gamer who immediately falls in love and swears to pair bond for as long as she will let him. The morning after their first copulation, he whispers, "I can't believe that it is possible to be this close to another person." He is precisely what Amanda has told herself that she wants. And now, quote, "Amanda," I said quietly to myself, "all you've whined about all year is that you haven't found a kind and nice and good guy who likes you. And now there's one in the bed. Take the chance. Never mind his weird comments. You know that he says those things because he is insecure." It's unclear whether Emil is debilitatingly insecure or just lacks the social bravado that characterizes many promiscuous men. Amanda and her friends are so accustomed to the winners on short-term markets that they interpret other men to be anomalies. As Amanda tries to get used to Emil's low-key personality, her friend suffers a date with someone in the worst Tinder category, meaning that he's shy and quiet. Incapable of giving a sexy impression from the onset, such men rarely get to display potential long-term qualities. Amanda Romar in her book elaborates on how the demands of modern dating incentivize women to disregard men who are unable to trigger immediate arousal. Amanda has second thoughts about their future together after Emil declines her offer of having sex in a public park. In bed, when he awkwardly tries to shoot his sperm in her face, she concludes that he commits the gravest come-in-face fail ever. He cannot give her the sexual and social peak experiences that promiscuously successful men typically could give her on the first date. Instead, he offers post-coital cuddling, long-term commitment, and monogamy. Amanda fears that she has grown addicted to bad boy energy, that she is incapable of taking care of love as she has found it, or that she and Emil are only together because no one else wants them. She decides to take the lead by deleting Tinder. So, but Amanda, having grown out of her 20s where short-term mating strategy could be more common and realizing her declining fertility as she gets older, decides to embrace a long-term pair bonding orientation. Then in the final part of the chapter, he compares the experiences of the incel and the insing, and he thinks an incel has a much harder time because being at the bottom is a very tough starting point. A man has to do so many things to work his way up because there's challenging work that lies ahead for an incel who wants to succeed with mating. On the other hand, insengs, women who want a relationship but haven't found someone yet, they're not necessarily as the bottom, as women of all mate values can miscalibrate their strategies in a manner that complicates pair bonding, and once they have a better understanding of mating markets, they can make some easy changes. So Amanda could have reduced her suffering very easily and more quickly reached her mating goal if she had only understood why she had such easy access to sex while having difficult access to a relationship. I cannot wait to see this made into a movie because I can certainly relate. Like, it's so easy for us women to get access to sex. And like, some of us, we would rather be alone than be with some guy. And our society doesn't really encourage this type of pair bonding attraction system. Doesn't encourage. In the past, societies encouraged this because they had certain rules, like you should wait to have sex until you're married, and there was no birth control, and men actually married women that they impregnated, and the father would choose who you could marry. They were like restraints on women's sexual behavior, because women are the selectors actually of sex, really. And I think men are more the selectors of relationships, but we have to understand our different mating strategies, and women who want to pair bond definitely need to seek out men who are looking for a relationship and not just go by hotness. And I think we have to do some more things to bring courtship back, or trying to get to know each other, and get off of these apps, which totally discourage it. The apps promote a promiscuous attraction system. It's just like giving someone a sugar in everything that they eat. It's like fast food. I shouldn't even say fast food because I don't like fast food, but it's giving people like something that we never had before. It's kind of like people being on their phones all the time. They want that instant gratification, but that's not really what's going to fulfill you. And you can have really good sex with a man who's not instantly hot. Once you pair bond with a guy and he knows what you like and you're in love with him, you're going to have much better sex than you're going to have with these hot guys that just fuck around. A lot of them don't make good partners at all. And then later when they settle down, they're going to find a woman that they want. And a lot of women are not going to have them. So we really have to adjust our mating strategies if we want to be in a relationship. But if you don't, then don't. But I really can't wait for this movie to come out. Thank you for watching this video.